Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Education Ministry is in midst of drafting a bill to amend the Education Act to extend compulsory education from primary to secondary level. Now, while the proposal holds the promise of improved education opportunities, it also poses a challenge. How can we ensure that this expansion is equitable and does not exacerbate the existing educational disparities that many communities already face? Joining me on the show today is Shahnaz Al-Sadat. She is the chairperson and co-founder of the educational social enterprise Leap Ed Services. Shahnaz, thank you for being on the show with me today. Can I get your thoughts on what you think of this this proposed move by the Education Ministry? What are the potential benefits that you see of expanding compulsory schooling to the secondary level in Malaysia?
I mean, given that I have a legal background, so I completely understand using law to try and inculcate good community behaviors, right? And here, I think, honestly speaking, from a long-term view, it might be something we should do anyway, given that we do want to ensure that our parents particularly take accountability and ensure that the students actually continue until at least getting their SPM, because that's really a basic, like almost a safety net for all our students. And I think therefore, primarily that I think is what we are hoping to achieve by having the act, right? Because we're shifting the accountability now to parents, basically.
Okay. Do you see any challenges in legislating this?
Well, yeah. So my argument always is around prioritization. So, is this the most important thing right now? Kind of question mark, right? Because I do think that the biggest investment is not going to be in coming out with the act, coming out with the amendments. The biggest investment will have to be enforcement. Because the baseline right now is pretty low. I think just as last week, we had a trust school conference, so we had like 500 teachers, parents, students, and the parents were saying that being a young depertua PIBG for primary school, very different from being a secondary school, because secondary school, parents are just not engaged, okay? So yeah, they kind of leave it a little bit to their kids, right? They're at the age that they have the mind of their own. So I think parents are a bit like, I leave it. So if you are starting now, your baseline is low. So enforcement going to have to be high, right? So you're now going to have to spend resources, head space, time trying to actually enforce. Okay, that's one data point. The other data point we're going to have is, we already know pre-pandemic, 72%. Of the kids saying that after SPM, I do not want to continue my education. Today, after pandemic, that number I think is higher, number one. And number two is beginning earlier. So 16, 17, they're already saying that, why do I spend another 2 years trying to do this SPM? I'm already struggling to catch up. I might as well go and work, And that is a concern in the sense that if that is the starting point, okay, and in fact, there were 3 reasons, I think, that the Deputy Minister in the Parliament saying why they wanted to have the act. One is that access was an issue. Second was that the kids are not interested and lack motivation. And the third, is that why they are looking for, because of socio-economic factor, they need to work, right? They need to find money. I don't see how the act is going to solve this 3 at the moment, and so even if you do the act and you do the enforcement, I don't think it's going to it's actually going to address the root cause. I think that's my concern. The act itself is a good idea, but is this the right time for it? Maybe addressing the quality might be the better.
You talked a little bit about shifting the onus to the parent, in continuing secondary level education, particularly if you want to make it compulsory. in terms of the three issues that you mentioned about why kids drop out or don't complete their secondary schooling, access, motivation, and socioeconomic factors, how would a penalty address anything? Because we have that for primary level. I think it's 5,000 ringgit for parents as a fine for parents. If there is a similar penalty for secondary school, talk to me about the impact of that and how it might even exacerbate the situation.
Well, so that's the thing. So if parents already have a low influence, I mean, that's the data point, right? So, I don't know whether the penalty will even do anything. And addressing the root cause. So for example, access. I know sometimes when people talk about access, people think Sabah, Sarawak. I actually want to suggest even Selangor is having a problem right now. Not so much that the schools are not in the distance, but the schools are overflowing. There are many double session schools in Selangor. They are operating at 2 times of the normal capacity. So the school was built maybe for 500 students, and currently they're carrying 1,500 students. So who wants to go to a place that is like crowded and so. And then you have the second factor, which is the motivation. And I think there is question of the relevance, right? Is the education relevant to these children? Not just taking exams, but beyond that. So is it relevant to them? So if it's not preparing for life after exams, this is where what happens, right? So you're actually making it mandatory for the kids to go somewhere, spend a lot of their time in a day, which may not be meeting their needs. So, I mean, is it even the most human thing to do?
Right. So if this is something that the ministry is working on, we hear that the bill is currently being drafted to amend the Education Act, then how do we address that? Make sure that all the stakeholders, so government, educators, parents, all have a part to play in ensuring that the curriculum caters to diverse pathways for different students, caters to motivation, caters to access and equity. What needs to happen now, Shahnaz?
So that's why I talk about prioritization, because every time we talk about quality, how do we need to improve quality? The argument has always been that we don't have enough resources to do everything at once. We don't have headspace. We can't train all our 400,000 teachers, but then we have headspace and time to do something that has not so much impact. So for me, it's a question of prioritization. But alongside that, having said that, I empathize. If there is anything on that list that MOE squarely on their shoulder that they have to do is regulation, right? That one no one else can do for them, which is therefore I understand if they want to just tick that box, okay? Having said that, I think they have to have an alongside strategy, and maybe not just squarely on their shoulder. Really, a lot of people want to help, the NGOs, the social enterprises, the private sector, really want to help the ministry. And maybe as you talk about alternative pathways, because these students now require so many different things. So how do you create these alternative pathways so that they can actually, have a personalization kind of thing? And some of the adjustments you need to make is not curriculum, it's actually delivery. So it can be done, because I understand ministry needs, they're catering to the mainstream. There's 5 million students. So they need to make sure the curriculum revision goes through the due diligence process, which is great. But delivery-wise, you can change right now, actually, right? And a lot of people want to help. So Ministry of Education just need to open its doors, okay? And be open to all these different ideas and help that people are coming actually to help. And be able to say, okay, I can deal with this, but can you help me deal with some parts of it? Right now, there's a bit like, I can do everything and I'm doing well, right? There's a bit of that stance, and that is, and no one is not blaming squarely on them. It's like, let's help.
That's right. Yeah. So to maximize the resources and the opportunities that are out there that's being offered. Shahnaz, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Educationist Shahnaz Al-Sadat there. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. If you've just joined us on the show, we're discussing the Education Ministry's proposed move to expand compulsory schooling from primary to secondary, to include secondary school level as well. Now, how can we ensure that this does not already deepen the disparities in educational access and quality that exist in some communities? Joining us now is Auzellea Kristin Mozihim. She is coordinator at the Sabah-based Hive Educators, which aims to center teachers' voices through education discourse. Auzellea, thank you so much for being on the show today. Can I ask you how you think this proposed expansion of compulsory schooling to include secondary level might impact students and communities in Sabah?
Well, firstly, we need to look at the socio-economic aspect of this, and specifically because I'm in Sabah, so I'm gonna specifically talk about Sabah. I think there will be a lot of challenges in terms of this, because in Sabah, well, as it's generally known that Sabah has the highest rate of poverty. So it will, in terms of socio-economic aspect of the parents especially, it will definitely impact the students' attendance to schools. Because, okay, for example, because in Sabah we have the highest rate of poverty. This means that we have a lot of rural areas. And that rural area, which means there needs to be an increased rate of regional development. That means they need to have more improving basic infrastructure and also the amenities, which also will lead to economic development for that region in certain districts in Sabah, which will lead to employment opportunities for the parents or for the generally for the local residents in that particular district in Sabah, which will create more income for the families. And if the families, they have more income, then that means they are able to send the students, their children to schools, because their children, they do not have to help their parents to go to work, because there are a lot of cases like that. Students, they tend to drop out of school because they have to help their parents. Yeah, so right. I think that is one of the impact that tends to happen if there is no effort to quicken the regional development in certain districts in Sabah. So I'm looking at this not only at the education sector, but also in terms of those responsible for regional development. So this is not just the responsibility of education ministry. They cannot do it in silos. This also has to be a sort of a teamwork with other sectors as well. So that is one issue. And also, oh yeah.
Sorry, please continue. You were saying also?
Also, I think there's an issue of space. For example, in Sabah alone, there are students, they have to travel very far away from their houses. Therefore, they need to stay at the hostel. And also the parents, they cannot afford to send their children to that particular school. So they have the students, they have to stay at that hostel. So if we have this compulsory secondary education, that means that there needs to be more space for the hostel, because I know that there are certain schools, they are not able to accommodate all the students that live far away, and this will result in that particular student would not be able to attend school consistently. Okay, so it's not that the student is lazy, but it's because he lives so far away from the school. So that is a problem. So first thing is also the hostel, infrastructure for the hostel at the school. And also we need more classrooms, because if every student, every secondary school student, they are required, it is compulsory for them to go to school, then that means there needs to be more classrooms, because we do not want a crowded classroom. It will be very inconducive, not only for the teacher, but also for the students. Yes.
Right. So can I ask you, Zal, you brought up really important points for the ministry to consider as they are drafting this this bill to amend the Education Act to make secondary school compulsory. What dangers do you see if the infrastructure doesn't change, if the socio-economic development does not come to Sabah, if there isn't enough space in the hostels and more access and equitable access for education? What are your concerns if they pass this bill without all these changes that need to come with it?
Then basically the students, they won't be able to go to school, and then the parents will be penalized, which we do not want that, but it's not their fault, because like I said, there needs to be a sort of teamwork with other sectors as well, so that this is particularly for, like I mentioned before, parents who are of lower socioeconomic status. So it's very important for other sectors to work together as well with the education ministry. And also, like I mentioned, education ministry, they cannot work in silos in terms of enabling every student to go to school. Yeah.
Right. How do you think this might impact educators in Sabah who are already maybe trying to get students to attend secondary school, complete their secondary school education?
Well, I think the educators, they are already putting their efforts to make sure that all of their students will go to school. There are a lot of efforts that the teachers are already doing, that the school is already doing. And even though currently it's not legislated yet, but all of the teachers, I believe, the school heads, I believe they all want their students to go to school. So there are a lot of I think, of course, there will be a lot of programs that the school will do. I mean, they have the the spirit and the responsibility of an educator to see their students become successful. So currently, yeah, they are doing that. So it's basically because they have the fire of the educator. So I think it's a given that they will do every effort to make sure that their students will attend school.
Do you think that this is a good move, Zell, to make secondary school compulsory?
Yes, this is definitely a good move. It's a step in the right direction. As it signals to the people that the Ministry of Education is committed to ensuring that no child is left behind, in education. And also, from what I have gathered, the ministry has also done stakeholder engagements, with various individuals and groups such as parents, teachers, and NGOs and academics. It's good that they have included all of the important voices in education. But even so there's legislation, doesn't mean that there will be effective implementation. And also sustainability. Sometimes implementation is seasonal, but it's not sustaining. So it has to be there needs to be sustainability as well. So which means if we overlook these kinds of things, there will be certain segments in society that will be left behind. And like I mentioned before, particularly Sabah. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking with me, Zell. I appreciate your time. That was Auzellea Kristin Mozihim from the Sabah-based Hive Educators. We're going to take another very quick break. Stay tuned to consider this. Hi, I'm Melisa Idris. Thanks for staying with me on Consider This. Let's continue our discussion about making secondary school compulsory in Malaysia. That's a proposal that the Ministry of Education is currently looking into. Dr Adelina Asmawi joins me now. She's an associate professor in the Department of Language and Literacy Education at University of Malaya. Dr Adelina, thank you for being on the show today. I think most of us are aware that that schooling in Malaysia is compulsory up till standard 6, and then parents who don't send their kids to primary school can get fined up to 5,000 ringgit or even some jail time. I'm wondering if we could begin our conversation with your thoughts on the effectiveness of such penalties. If secondary school is going to be made mandatory, how do you think this will play out for both the students and the parents in the community?
Happy to be back, Melissa. Au contraire, Melissa, actually, many, I think, both parents and educators are somewhat not aware. A lot of them are not aware that secondary education is not compulsory in Malaysia. Some were like, really? No? I said, yeah, it's not. So looking at where we are going, I applaud the ministry for having arrested this issue. I think they began in 2019 to review, and I think 4 years later only we are like catching on this bus where we need to have this to be mandatory, similar to other developed and developing countries. In fact, neighbors are all our neighboring countries as well. So I think in terms of enforcement, which is very important, if failure to provide secondary education to students or our children, we can talk about many different kinds of consequences. We can talk about fines, we can talk about community services, we can talk about the revoke of the driving license as done in other countries as well. So we can talk about different kinds of enforcement methods to address this.
Okay. All right. So you say this is a good thing that the Ministry of Education is looking into. What do you think needs to happen in tandem with such legislative change?
I feel like we are already, I feel like most of the Malaysian parents, schools and educators are already on the bus. We have implemented this because we have the ministry recognizing different types of schools to address different types of learners. We've got like sports schools, vocational schools, technical schools, boarding schools, religious schools, many different types of schools. So the fact that they recognize these schools, we're already in the bus. It's just that the documentation is now playing catch up. So that's just the funny bit of it, because everywhere else we look, the maximum age where compulsory education is applied would be like 15 to 16-year-olds. You will only see Malaysia having 12 there. Statistically, we look like we're backwards, whereas implementation wise, we're already in front. So we're like working backwards. It's like trying to play catch up.
Okay. Cementing this through a legislative change to make sure that it's compulsory. But can I ask you, Dr. Adelina, that Malaysia has had some long-standing issues when it comes to disparities in educational access, in educational inequalities, and I'm just wondering how compulsory education for secondary schooling, what can be done to make sure that it doesn't exacerbate those disparities, that it is in fact there is more equity when it comes to education, particularly for certain communities who are marginalized?
Okay, so I think the ministry has to work together with the community. The community must understand that this is also their job, their responsibilities. It's not just up to the teachers or the ministry, it's also up to the community. That's the first thing that we have to understand. So what we can do is we can have, for example, a mobile classroom, makeshift classroom, if we don't have enough resources, something that can rotate, a mobile classroom that can rotate between the rural areas or villages. We can also do the same thing in terms of teacher. If we don't have enough teachers, we can also have teacher rotating, providing and instructing and adding values or materials, working with the community, specific communities that they're in, where teachers are like limited. We can also have recorded materials. We can have good teachers teaching, like recorded videos and all that implemented. Apps, if we have network, especially in these areas, we can have those. We can have satellite schools like in Japan. We can have we can take them out and let them go into the boarding schools. We can provide transportation for those who are far away from the schools. And in fact, in Sweden, for example, they have Stockholm archipelagos. They have multi-grade classrooms where there are not many kids, like not many students per level. They have multi-grade classrooms. So it's also to do with curriculum adaptation. The teachers have to also, or this community have to work together in having a flexible scheduling. Of course, nutrition programs. That is like basic physiological needs of such students. We already have this in place, but we have to look at this further to ensure that everybody gets equitable or quality education. Yeah.
So wonderful suggestions to address the issue of access to education. But what about when it comes to the motivation of students to want to continue learning? What also about the what about the socioeconomic factors that sometimes prohibit students from completing their secondary schooling? How would you consider those factors?
It's to do with awareness. It's to do with awareness of these students or these children, and awareness of their parents, and the awareness of the community. Like I said, they have to work together and collaborate. They must be aware of such needs. We're not, for example, if you look at we want to have this done so that there are zero dropouts. That shouldn't be. That's very, very short term. What we're looking at, economic growth long term. We're looking at skilled workforce. We're looking at educated workforce, ability to face a more globalized world next time. So if they have an awareness, if they understand why they're doing this, and when we talk about secondary education being made mandatory, we're not talking about just following the normal public school. We have to address homeschool. We have to talk about other types of school. That's why I said the ministry has already recognized such schools, and they have to be made aware. Therefore, we will have, inshallah, less resistance by the parents and the students, inshallah.
That was Dr. Adelina Asmawi wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.